A little black girl walks into a police station, eyes swollen, voice trembling. She clutches her belly like it's the only shield she has left. Then she whispers, "Do all daddies do this?" And the room goes silent, because the truth behind those words is heavier than anyone expected. It was supposed to be just another slow Tuesday morning at the Maplewood precinct, a mostly black neighborhood tucked at the edge of Montgomery, Alabama. Officer Darnell Brooks, one of the few black officers on the force, was nursing his bitter coffee when the glass doors creaked open with a hesitant squeak. A little girl stepped in, her skin the color of cinnamon, her dress faded and too thin for the fall air. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her tiny fists clenched at her sides. Her lips quivered, and yet somehow she stood tall, like she practiced courage in front of a mirror. Officer Darnell rose slowly. Something in her eyes stopped in mid-step, not just fear, but something deeper, something broken. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said gently, kneeling down to meet her at eye level. "What's your name?" The child hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the window, to the door, then to the white female officer watching from behind the front desk, as if gauging whether she could trust this room, or if the world outside might still be safer. "Amari," she whispered. "Amari James." "That's a beautiful name," said Officer Latoya, now walking over carefully, her badge tucked behind her soft voice. "Can you tell us what's wrong, baby?" Amari's lips parted. Nothing came out at first. Then she looked up, tears welling, and she asked a question that would unravel everything. "Do all daddies do this?" The words dropped like a hammer. Darnell froze. Latoya glanced at him. They'd both seen children cry. Over scraped knees, Miss Buss's detention slips. But this wasn't that. This was the sound of a child who had carried silence for too long. Latoya gently crouched beside the girl, lowering herself so she wouldn't tower over her. "Can you tell us what you mean, sweet girl? What does your daddy do?" But Amari just shook her head. More tears slipped down her cheeks. She glanced again at the door, as if expecting someone to barge in at any moment. I just needed to know," she whispered, "because if every daddy does it, maybe I should just stop wishing for something different." Darnell's chest tightened. He knew that kind of resignation, had seen it in kids who'd lived through too much for too long. He reached out his hand slowly, palm up. "You're safe here, Amari," he said. "No one's going to hurt you. We're going to figure this out together." "All right." She stared at his hand. Then, like she was handing over something sacred, she placed her tiny fingers in his. But none of them knew. This wasn't just a scared girl. This was a spark to something bigger. A storm that would expose buried truths and challenge everything they thought they knew about good homes in good neighborhoods. As Amari sat in the precinct's waiting room, still clutching Darnell's hand, she looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you going to make me go back?" Officer Latoya moved slowly, pulling up a chair. "Amari, do you want to talk about something else first? Maybe how you got here today?" The girl gave a small nod, grateful for the change of subject. "I walked," she said, "from the house near the old Baptist church. Mama used to say it was the prettiest street in all of Montgomery." Darnell saw it, the way her eyes shimmered when she spoke of her mama, the way a smile briefly passed through the sadness. But it vanished just as quickly. "Where's your mama now, baby?" Latoya asked gently. Amari looked down. "She went to heaven 3 years ago. That's when things got different." Darnell and Latoya shared a glance, the kind of look only 2 black officers could give in a room like that. They'd both grown up in households where grief wasn't discussed, just swallowed, quiet and deep. What was it like before she passed? Latoya asked softly, trying to keep her voice from cracking. Amari's eyes lit up just for a moment. She made pancakes every Saturday, and she'd hum when she folded laundry, like the house was singing. She used to brush my hair and call me her little bloom. She paused, her smile fading. Daddy was different then, too. Darnell leaned in. Different how? He used to carry me on his shoulders, told me bedtime stories about kings and queens that looked like me. He said my curls were a crown. Her fingers twisted around a tissue now damp and frayed. But after Mama died, he said it was time to stop all that. Said hugs and bedtime stories were for babies, and I needed to be strong now. Latoya blinked slowly. That line, be strong, it had been weaponized against black children for generations, as if their softness was a weakness the world wouldn't forgive. Amari, Darnell asked gently, when's the last time your daddy hugged you? The girl thought. At Mama's funeral. I was crying so much I couldn't breathe. He held me for a minute. But after that, he said, we don't cry in this house no more. Silence filled the room, the kind that hums inside your chest. What about your friends? Latoya asked, do you get to play with them? Amari shook her head. He says our house isn't for playing. And I'm not allowed to visit other homes. He says I might pick up bad habits. Like what? Darnell asked, eyebrows tight. Like expecting things, she said, her voice flat. Daddy says when you expect hugs or kind words, you get disappointed. And that's how people get hurt. Darnell felt it then, a wave of something cold, something familiar, because he'd grown up with that lie too. Darnell steadied his breath. This little girl wasn't just neglected. She was being trained to believe love was conditional. That care was currency. That she wasn't worthy unless she earned it through silence and obedience. Amari, he said gently, when you go to other kids' houses, what do their parents do? Her eyes widened. They hug their kids. They say stuff like, I'm proud of you, or you did great. I thought maybe they were just pretending, because I was there, but then I wondered. She paused. Wonder what? Latoya asked, leaning in. Amari looked at both of them, her voice shaking. If maybe my daddy forgot how to love, or if he just loves me in a different way. That sentence cracked something in Latoya, that quiet, desperate hope children cling to when the people who are supposed to protect them stop showing up the right way. That's why I came here, Amari said. I needed to ask, because if all daddies do what mine does, then I'll stop hoping for something else. Before they could answer, Darnell asked carefully, does your daddy know you're here? Amari shook her head fast. No, he thinks I'm at school. But I couldn't concentrate. My teacher, Miss Perkins, kept asking if I was okay. I almost told her, but Daddy says we don't talk about family business, that people wouldn't understand. Latoya and Darnell exchanged a long look, that kind of silence. Latoya whispered, that's how too many of our babies disappear. Darnell turned back. And what happens if someone does interfere, like you said? He says they might try to ruin his way of raising me, and his way is to make me strong and unbreakable. Not soft, not spoiled. Just then, the station phone rang, loud and sharp. Amari jolted upright. I need to go, she said, panic rising. If Daddy finds out I left, he'll say I failed him. He says disappointment is worse than anger. Latoya stood. What if we called your school and told Miss Perkins you're safe? Would that help? Amari froze. She'd care? Of course, Latoya said, fighting back tears. She cares a lot. And for the first time since she walked in, Amari looked shocked, not scared, but surprised. The idea of someone worrying about her was new, even if it's just me. Amari asked, her voice barely audible. Especially if it's you, Darnell said. You matter. You've always mattered. Amari blinked, like the words didn't quite land, like they were too big, too warm. She bit her lip. But Daddy says if I expect people to care, I'll just get hurt when they don't. Latoya crouched beside her again. Different families have different rules, that's true. But some rules, they're not okay. Some rules hurt more than they help. Amari looked down at her hands, counting softly on her fingers. We have rules, too. I can't ask for things I want. That's greedy. I can't cry. That's dramatic. I can't talk to neighbors. That's bothering people. And I can't say, I love you or ask for hugs. Daddy says those words are only for people who deserve them. The room fell quiet. Darnell's throat felt tight. Amari, when was the last time someone told you they loved you? She took a long breath. Mama, right before she died. She whispered it in my ear. I've been saving it since. I didn't want to waste it. Latoya closed her eyes for a second. That wasn't neglect. That was soul starvation. Baby, she said gently. That's not something you ever have to earn. The girl looked confused. Are you saying love doesn't have to be earned? I'm saying love is supposed to be yours just for being you. Amari looked away. But what if I'm just weak? Maybe Daddy's way is the only way to make sure I survive. No, Darnell said firmly. We've heard that line our whole lives. It's how our people were taught to hide pain, to bury joy, to stay strong even when breaking. But surviving ain't the same as living, Amari. The door swung open. It was Ms. Harper, the social worker. She had kind eyes and natural coils tucked beneath her scarf. Sorry to barge in, she said. I came as soon as I got the school's call. Then she spotted the child in the chair. Amari, she gasped. Miss Perkins had been worried sick. Amari blinked again. She was worried? Yes, baby. She called the principal. The principal called us. And I left everything to come find you. And just like that, Amari's tears shifted. They weren't of fear, but shock. Because someone noticed she was missing. Amari's voice was barely a whisper as she sat surrounded by the three adults. Officer Darnell, Officer Latoya, and Ms. Harper, the social worker with eyes that didn't flinch from the truth. I just needed to know if Daddy's rules are normal, Amari said. Like, standing in the corner every day after school, for an hour, so I can reflect on how to be a better daughter. Latoya's jaw clenched, but she didn't interrupt. And I can't ask for food, even if I'm hungry. That's being needy. He says I'll eat when he says it's time. Sometimes I fall asleep before dinner. MS. Harper scribbled quietly, her fingers tense on the pen. And if I cry, even a little, Amari continued, I have to go to my room and stay there, until I can act like a grown-up. Last time I cried, I was in there for 2 nights. Darnell tried to stay calm, but he'd grown up with those same echoes, not in exact words, but in the same cold logic. Black kids, especially, were expected to be grown far too early, expected to swallow pain, to man up or toughen up before they could spell those words. Amari, Ms. Harper said softly, if you break one of these rules, what happens? Daddy gets disappointed. And when he's disappointed, he doesn't talk to me. For days. He calls it thinking time. He says if I feel invisible, maybe I'll remember not to make the same mistake. Latoya stood and turned away, biting back emotion. That wasn't just discipline. That was emotional captivity. And it had been masked in a tone too many black households knew. Respectability, obedience, fear dressed up as structure. Sometimes, I forget how to talk, Amari whispered. I forget what my own voice sounds like. A silence fell. Ms. Harper gently leaned forward. Amari, can I ask you something important? When you think about going home tonight, what do you feel? Amari didn't even hesitate. Scared. Scared of what? That he'll find out I spoke. And the thinking time will last forever. And worse, that I'll make him sad. Daddy says if I leave or make him look bad, I'll break his heart. And I don't want him to be alone. Darnell sat down across from her. Baby, it's not your job to protect your daddy's feelings. That's what grown folks are supposed to do for you, not the other way around. Amari looked stunned, like no one had ever said those words to her before. Just then, the door slammed open. A tall man, light-skinned with a sharp jaw and a military stance, stormed in. He wore a press shirt, tied tight, and anger tight in his throat. Where is she? He barked. Where's my daughter? Amari shrank behind Latoya's chair. I knew this would happen, she whispered. He's not mad I'm gone. He's mad I made him look weak. Mr. James, Ms. Harper said, standing calmly, Amari is safe. We're here to talk about what she shared. Family business is private, he roared. This girl's just confused. Soft, picking up bad habits from school. Darnell stepped in front of Amari. No, sir. She's not confused. She's courageous. She's 8. Mr. James snapped. What does she know about anything? Discipline builds character. That's the problem with the world. Too many people coddling feelings. She's 8, Latoya repeated, her voice steady. And she walked here alone because she thought maybe she didn't deserve love. The room froze. Mr. James turned toward his daughter. "Come on, Amari. Let's go." But something had shifted. Amari stood, not behind anyone, but beside them. Her hand still shook, but her voice held. "Daddy, I don't want to go." He blinked. "What did you say?" "I want to stay somewhere safe tonight." The silence that followed wasn't weak. It was powerful. It was a child reclaiming her voice. Mr. James looked around the room, at the black officer who didn't back down, the black woman who stood between him in silence, and the social worker who saw his daughter as more than a quiet child in a clean dress. "I'm her father," he said, but his voice had lost its sharp edge. "And she's a little black girl who finally believes she matters," Latoya said. "That's what scares you, isn't it?" Mr. James didn't answer, because the answer was yes. Hours later, Amari sat in a modest but warm living room, curled on a soft couch beside Mrs. Evelyn Lewis, a kind, older black woman certified to foster emergency placements. On the table sat a cup of cocoa, untouched. Amari stared at it like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to drink it. Mrs. Lewis noticed. "You don't need to ask, baby. That cocoa's yours." "No rule, just comfort." Amari blinked. "Even if I didn't earn it?" Mrs. Lewis leaned in. "Sweetheart, being you is more than enough." The words landed like medicine. Amari took a small sip, and for the first time in days, her hands stopped trembling. That night, she dreamed of her mother, not as a faded memory, but as a presence. In the dream, her mama kissed her forehead and whispered, "You did the right thing, baby. You're not alone anymore." The next morning, she woke to sunlight and soft laughter from the kitchen. The kind of morning she'd almost forgotten existed. But she couldn't help the worry creeping in. What if Daddy never changes? What if he never sees me as someone worth hugging again? 3 weeks passed. Then came the hearing. A courtroom filled with clean suits, cold stares, and cautious hope. Amari sat beside Ms. Harper and Officer Latoya, while Darnell stood quietly in the gallery. On the other side sat Mr. James, iron shirt, stiff shoulders, and an expression that screamed control, until you looked closely and saw the cracks. The judge, a stern black woman named Han, Justice Monroe, listened as Harper spoke. "Your Honor, this child has not only endured emotional deprivation, but was made to believe that silence, fear, and invisibility were virtues. She came to us not with bruises, but with wounds just as deep." The judge nodded. "Mr. James, you've completed 2 sessions of counseling. Tell me, what have you learned?" He cleared his throat. "I learned that grief isn't an excuse for control, and that what I call discipline was actually me running from my own fear. I didn't know how to love without losing, so I shut it off. And do you believe your daughter deserves love without conditions?" He looked at Amari, who didn't look away this time. "Yes," he said, eyes glassy. "More than anything." Amari stood. "Your Honor, I don't hate my daddy, but I need you to know I don't want to go back unless I'm allowed to be a kid, not a caretaker, not a soldier, just a kid who's allowed to cry and still be loved." The courtroom went still. Even Mr. James dropped his head. Judge Monroe exhaled. "Then here is my ruling. Amari will remain in protective placement for 30 more days while her father continues court-ordered therapy. If and only if he shows sustained change, she may return home with full oversight and check-ins. Until then, her right to safety and emotional dignity will not be compromised." Relief flooded Amari's body, not because someone saved her, but because for once, someone saw her. She was no longer invisible. 6 weeks later, Amari returned to the same police station, not trembling, not hiding, but walking tall in her Sunday dress, clutching a drawing in her hands. Her curls were neater now, her eyes brighter, and in place of silence, she carried a voice. Officer Darnell looked up from his desk. "There's our brave girl," he smiled, standing as she walked in. "Officer," Latoya stepped out from the side office. "You brought something?" Amari nodded, unrolling the paper. It was a drawing, bold and bright. It showed a little black girl standing between 3 adults, a cop, a counselor, and a woman with kind eyes. Above their heads were words, drawn in purple crayon. "Thank you for teaching me that I matter." Ms. Harper appeared just in time, her smile wide as she hugged Amari tight. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." Amari looked up. "I want to help other kids now. Kids like me. I want them to know they're allowed to speak. That just because something's always been that way doesn't mean it's right." A quiet fell, not of sadness, but of reverence. This wasn't just a child healed. This was a future advocate. Behind her, the door creaked open again. Mr. James stepped inside. But he looked different now, not just in posture, but in soul. His shoulders weren't square with anger. They sagged with humility. He nodded to Darnell, to LaToya, then knelt beside his daughter. "I'm still learning," he said. "But every night now I say I love you, and every morning I remind her she's not responsible for my pain. That's my work to carry, and I'm carrying it." Amari looked up at him. "He tells me it even when I forget to be perfect. That's how I know he's changing," she added. "Because now, even when I cry, he doesn't send me away. He holds me." The three officers smiled. Not every father would have chosen to learn, but hers did, and more importantly, she had chosen herself first. As they prepared to leave, Amari turned one last time toward the people who gave her back her voice. "If another little girl like me walks in one day," she said, "can you tell what you told me?" LaToya knelt down eye level. "I'll tell her this. You matter. You deserve love that doesn't have rules. And there are grown-ups who will fight to make sure you get it." Amari smiled, then whispered the words she once feared would be wasted. "I love you." And this time, they weren't whispered to ghosts or locked behind rules. They were given freely, joyfully, because she had finally learned the truth. Love isn't earned by silence. It's deserved by existence. And now, Amari would spend the rest of her life making sure every child, especially those whose skin made them invisible too often, knew that.